Hey there, welcome back to That's Not Proper, and I'm your host, Corey Asuncion. So I've switched things up just a little bit over the past couple weeks, just because everything has obviously been a little bit mayhem for everyone. And I've been discussing different topics with regards to homeschooling now that a lot of us are in that situation. And considering I have a background with homeschooling, I've been doing it for around, almost 25 years. There's some things I know. I do not profess to be an expert, but there's some things I know and some suggestions I can give. I don't have all the answers, but hopefully someone can listen to this podcast today and get a little bit of an idea of something maybe they can try out, or at least just some reassuring that, hey, this is hard. You are not alone and you do not have to do it all. I do recommend taking a look at my Instagram and my Facebook. My username, or whatever they call it, is at That's Not Proper. And I've been posting a couple videos periodically because I get some questions and I'd like to be able to answer them as soon as possible. And sometimes it's another week before a podcast comes out. So sometimes I answer a little bit more specific questions that I have received on Instagram in a video or on Facebook on a video. So I do suggest you take a look at those things just to see if there's anything there that can help you out. Today, I wanted to focus a little bit more on the older years, junior high and high school. And I feel for these kids right now. Some of them just found out that they are not going to be able to walk in graduation or promotions. They're not going to be able to go to proms, and I don't know if they even call them balls anymore. There's still the issue with not being able to participate in sports activities, and this has got to be crushing for some of these kids. And so as parents, I think it's a really grand idea that we are really sensitive to that. There might be an aspect to it to ourselves where we're like, well, it's really, in the grand scheme of things, not that big of a deal, but to them, it might just be the world. And so I do suggest that we're really sensitive to that, and that we are taking a moment to respond in kindness and love and letting them know that I'm sure it's hard. I don't completely understand, but I'm here for you so you can talk to me about it. And I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. As parents, it's important that you take time for yourself as well. And I know that that's hard to find that time, and it's a crazy, chaotic time, especially with those that are also working from home, in addition to now having children or many children home. It's stressful, and you're trying to figure out how to do all of this. Be easy on yourself. Be easy on your children. You do not have to necessarily recreate an entire classroom type situation. It doesn't have to be like that. You can break things up. Now, again, I don't know how each and every school is doing everything, but I do think it's important that you take a look at how your child is facing this. And if they need a break, or if you need a break, take the break. It's way healthier to do it that way. What I had spoken on with regards to how we can do some things with our kids during this time is I had used the phrase use everything. And I can reiterate that. And basically what I mean is use everything in your home, use everything in your life, use everything that's like real life skills type of things that you have to do all the time that maybe you didn't learn in school and that you maybe learned at home, or you had to end up teaching yourself. I've noticed myself that there's a lot of people, kids maybe even, that don't necessarily learn typical life skills. That's not necessarily a bad, terrible thing. It just presents a frustrating thing when you get older and you don't know how to do these things. And so this is actually a kind of a great time. I mean, think about it. How many of your kids know how to change a tire, check their oil, or change their oil? Have they ever had to balance a checkbook? Now, most of us do everything online, but still balancing it and making sure it's accurate. Have you talked to your 18-year-old kids about the value of beginning to establish credit at this time? These are some really good things that you can teach your child because you've already had to do all of this. So you're actually an excellent teacher. Just keep in mind, be patient while you're teaching them these things. One thing I've learned as a parent is that my response or reaction to difficult situations, whether it be, how I verbally express it, or in my face or in my body language, it is pretty much going to set the tone for the household. Sometimes it's, the mom is more of the tone setter. Sometimes it's the dad. Sometimes it's both. But sometimes when we have a reaction that is extreme, it sets a tone for the entire household. It sets them on edge. It can make them have the exact same response, not necessarily because that's what they're feeling, but because they're taking on what our response is. So it's really important that during this time we are really focused on how we're responding to this. This doesn't mean that you aren't going to show concern or express emotion, but it means attempt to keep it in check because it really can set the tone, especially if you notice that your child is maybe being rebellious or disruptive, or you're struggling with some areas of discipline, especially with the older ones. It Check yourself first and make sure that they are not feeding off of what your temperament is and how you're responding to it. It's really easy to let that go, and it's understandable, quite honestly, but it really can set the tone and the mood for the entire household, and it can then affect the way that you're educating your child, or even just how you're addressing this entire situation that we've got going on here right now. I mean, for example, I know that if I'm angry about something, the whole house is on edge, and I think the same thing rings true with regards to their father as well. The whole house can become on edge. And so you want to create a healthy and comfortable and safe environment for them. And so that includes checking ourselves as well. The whole load of this is not just solely on them. And so we are working together as a community, and that includes working as a community together with regards to their education. So I mentioned a little bit earlier about life skills, especially with these older ones. There's a lot more that they can do. I think sometimes when we look at our kids that are in high school or in junior high, we look at them as tiny little children, and they're really not anymore. They're almost adults. And in some aspects, some of our children really behave better than adults that we know that are in their 40s and further. And so they actually possess the ability to take on things at home that we may not necessarily request or require of them. And so doing things like I had said earlier, how many of your kids actually know how to change a tire? It's an excellent life skill, because if they get in a situation where they need to have their tire changed and mom or dad aren't there, or maybe they don't have AAA, or it'd be faster if they could do it themselves, heck, teach them how to do that. It is an important life skill, and it's not usually something that you would learn in a traditional school environment. Balancing a checkbook. We all need to make sure that we're paying attention to our finances. This is just a normal part of life, but it's not necessarily something that you learn in a school environment. And in addition to that, if you're able to let your kid take a look at your finances so that they can say, hey, mom and dad aren't just money bags. We've got things to pay, and this is how much it costs to feed a family and house a family and any additional expenses that we have. They get a better idea than exactly how it works within your own personal family, and why maybe sometimes they can't have everything that they ask for because the means just aren't there. The idea of teaching them how to establish credit. This is something that I started with my older kids once they turned 18. We talked about it prior to turning 18. And, everybody has varied opinions with regards to this. But because my partner and I struggled financially, and still do sometimes just because we're a one-income family, it was important that I let my kids know, hey, we struggled financially and our credit sucked. And so reestablishing credit is something that we've had to do. And it was hard, and it stunk to have to do that later on in life. And so something that I've explained to them is, it's an unfortunate truth, but in order to get decent credit, good credit, you actually have to establish that credit, and part of establishing that credit is going into debt in a sense. Now, it doesn't mean going deep into debt or anything like that. But what my kids, for example, started out doing was getting their first checking account, and then they got their first cell phone. My kids have all had to pay for their own cell phones. I'd love to be able to pay for everybody's cell phone, but with this many kids, I can't do that financially. So if they wanted a cell phone, they had to purchase the phone themselves. They had to use their own social security number, and they had to have their own account. And so they had to become responsible for the payment of that every single month. I encouraged them to get their first credit card, and I talked to them very specifically about the best way to handle a credit card, a responsible way to handle a credit card, paying it off every month, but still using it so you can establish credit. And what's fabulous is my older children that are still at home. I have 3 that are over the age of 18. Actually, I take that back. Now I have 4 over the age of 18, and they have all begun to establish credit. And now they have silly little, monthly little battles over whose credit score is better. But when you're talking about my kids have credit scores that are nearing 800, and they're only between the ages of 18 and 20, or one of them's 23, it's kind of fabulous and an encouragement for me that they may not struggle the same way later on in life with their credit, like having the inability to rent a home or get into a home or purchase a vehicle or anything else that has to do with having good credit. They've begun to establish it early. Again, something that you don't hear much with regards to in a traditional school environment. And stuff like that can be done even if you don't have a lot of money, even if they don't have a lot of money. Like I said, we don't have a lot of money. We never have had a lot of money. And so it almost becomes even more important to pay attention to finances and to your budget and to establishing credit. It still can be done, and it can be done wisely on a very small budget and a very small income. Now, even further beyond that, as far as life skills are concerned, every single day in your home, things have to be taken care of, chores and stuff like that. And good luck on the chore thing. I don't have a lot of information and suggestions to give to that because I have been trying to create chore sheets and schedules and ways that we should do things. And in my mind, oh, it's going to work great. And it doesn't always pan out the way I want it to. There's still struggles to get things done. All I can say with regards to that is be consistent and still encourage them to get it done. Encourage when they've done it. I kind of can be a little bit of a perfectionist with regards to certain things. Like, for example, I have a weird thing about how towels are folded. And when it comes down to situations where my kids are helping out, I have to put that aside and be like, you know what? The towels are folded, whether or not they're folded properly. Who even cares? Are the dishes done? Did they not wipe the counters? Yeah, irritating, but damn it, the dishes are done. I don't even care. I didn't have to do them. Same thing with the bathrooms. That's not how I would do it, but it was done. And so when they've done it, just encourage them and thank them and tell them you appreciate them because the help, no matter how small it is still of great value. A really cool thing that actually my kids tend to enjoy. I don't always get to do this a ton just because sometimes I can be a little limited on my patience, but involving them in meal planning. And there's a couple ways that you can do this with kids from junior high through high school. It could be, let's say you're on a limited budget and you don't have a lot in your pantry or your refrigerator right now. And as we all know, getting out to go grocery shopping is posing to be an issue. So you have to create meals with what you've got sometimes. Now, the fortunate thing for us, because we've been low income for so many years, there are times where we barely have nothing and we've gotten pretty creative. But the other thing that you can do with your kids during this time, and again, this could be junior high all the way up through high school, is have them create the menu. Have them take a look at what's in your pantry and your fridge and figure out if they can create a meal that they are going to organize and they are going to prepare for the family. And for that meal, tell them that you'll take care of all the dishes. Just an FYI, just be prepared for a ton of dishes. If they're someone who hasn't done a lot of cooking. I notice my kids sometimes when they cook, as much as I appreciate it, I'm kind of like, oh, that's a lot of dishes. But anyhow, they've done something to contribute to the family. They've taken a little bit of a load off of you. Encourage them to do that. I think they'd actually enjoy that. There's a lot of kids that I think would really enjoy being part of that. If they've created the meal, they've made it for everybody. Have them look at recipes online. If you do have the ability to go shopping, find out what they want to make, get a recipe together, have them tell you what they need. Right now, I wouldn't suggest everybody going to the grocery store, so have one person go out and get what is needed and have them prepare that meal for the family. And maybe even if it's something that they really enjoy, have them be the person who cooks that meal once a week, whether it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Since we're all home for all the meals now, a lot of us are cooking a whole heck of a lot more than we used to. Have them be in charge of a meal. Okay, so I talked about this a little bit in the part 1 of Homeschooling Was Not on My Agenda, and I was discussing sex positivity and consent, and that this time where we're all home together, it could be used as a way to have conversations with our children with regards to consent and sex positivity. Okay, so I'm going to give you a few statistics that I found after doing a little bit of research from various websites. But the deal is with children around the ages of 8 or 9, they have already become curious and aware of sexual arousal with regards to themselves as far as touch and things that they feel and that they sense. By the age of 11, majority, many, if not all, of children have already been exposed to pornography. So the thing is, parents, We really need to be speaking to our children about sex and sexual consent. It is not a comfortable conversation. I know this. I have 7 kids. It's not comfortable, but it is necessary. The other thing is what they've been able to prove. I found this on the American Sexual Health Association website. They have found that 83% of kids don't want to talk to their parents about sex because it's not necessarily an open conversation, and there's not a judgment-free zone. It's not shame-free. But what they have found is children that speak to their parents openly about sex and without judgment. They have found that majority of those children are less likely to have unplanned pregnancies, and they are also more likely to, if they have sex, protect themselves and be a lot wiser about it. So this is something that's actually really vital to your child's health and welfare and life, but also their education. And it's a great time for us to be able to be implementing that now, where we're having to spend all of this time together. So I know that's something parents tend to be concerned about, and I've talked to moms about this, and we have this easy accessibility to everything, which includes, sex and porn and all those types of things, just through our cell phones. And because many of our children have cell phones, especially children that are in school situations, because parents, I know why parents would give a child a cell phone. They want their child to be able to have a connection to them when they're away from them. And it makes sense to me. I do understand why a parent would do that. I had stated earlier that I didn't have that, but keep in mind, I had my kids home with me, so I didn't have the same situation. So I do understand why, but it does create a situation now where our children have access to things that we may not necessarily want them to have access to when we're talking about sex and pornography. So here's something that really is vital and is important. I hear a lot of parents say things like, oh, I found out my son or my daughter was looking up porn and I took his phone away and I told him how dare he or how dare she, and, they were in trouble okay, that's bad. Don't do that. You have just now created a situation of shame and of judgment. The fact that your child is seeking sexual activity or looking up sex online, it's really not that abnormal for them to wonder about these things, for them to desire these things. They are human beings after all. These are natural, normal desires. What does need to occur is that you create an environment where they feel comfortable enough to talk to you about these things. So my suggestions with regards to this is to first reflect on yourself. Ask yourself first, why? Why would you think that your child's doing this? Before you even go down the rabbit hole of yelling at your kid or getting upset with your kid, ask why. Why does my child look these things up, or why is he or she interested in these things? And then ask yourself, have I had open, shame-free, non-judgmental conversations with my child about sex, about masturbation, about their bodies, about sexual activity with various people or one person or no people or whatever? Have we had these conversations? Don't get angry with them. Get understanding with them. Does that make sense? If we're angry with them and we haven't sought to look at it from their point of view, from their area of lack of understanding, it would make a little bit more sense. They don't know. They're curious. They want to know. So it's important that you pause. First, ask yourself why, ask why you're angry, and ask if you have created an environment of understanding that is shame-free and judgment-free. You need to keep lines of communication open. You can't expect them to come to you with something as intimate as sex and pornography and things like that if you haven't created an environment where they feel like they can come to you. Maybe your values are very conservative, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that doesn't change the fact that your child's values may not be exactly the same, or maybe they're confused as to why they have to have those values. So you've got to create an environment where they can question, where they can ask, and they can feel comfortable coming to you with regards to that. Sexual searching is normal. And so creating this line of communication, creating a discussion where you guys can have, these uncomfortable conversations and even say, God, this is uncomfortable. Hey, let's talk about this. Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about pornography and the reality of these types of relationships. And let's talk about masturbation. Let's talk about what's going on with your body. And let's talk about what you want to do and why you want to look these things up. It's really, really important that they understand they can come to you. You're creating an atmosphere where they are in a shame-free, judgment-free area. Not only that, it adds an element to their character and to their lives where maybe they aren't going to feel like they have to give in to the pressures that are all around them, that they know and realize that their body is theirs and that they have the right to consent or to not consent. And not only that, that they can come to you with anything, whether it be joys, fears, desires, wants, or questions, and get information that is accurate, judgment-free, and shame-free. Parents, I know this is a really difficult time. It's a difficult time for all of us. And I just encourage you to take it one moment at a time. I know that it's hard. We're all under a lot of stress, and that includes our children. And just know that you are not alone and that there is help out there. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to message me or email me at Corey@that'snotproper.com. Also, you can check out my website at that'snotproper.com, where you can actually communicate with me and other listeners directly on the website while you listen to the podcast straight from there. Check out my Facebook and Instagram at That's Not Proper. Remember that sometimes there I shared like 1 to 3 minute videos just discussing some topics that people have emailed me with questions about. I hope that everybody is doing well. Take care of yourselves, and please don't forget to listen to the next episode of That's Not Proper.